This is the Toyota Innova Touring Sport. It's basically an Innova E with a few upgrades. Is it worth the extra money? Let's find out. Okay, so I did a review of the Toyota Innova G a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't seen it yet, you can click on the link above. This right here is the Toyota Innova Touring Sport. It's pretty easy to tell them apart from the outside. The G is actually the more expensive variant, but from the outside, it almost looks like it's the other way around. The Touring Sport has a couple of aesthetic upgrades. It has a wraparound skirt with chrome accents. It also has chrome accents around the grille. On the sides, it has these flat black fender moldings. It has body-colored door handles, and the 16-inch wheels are painted in black. At the back, it has this black molding in between the two taillights. Overall, the Touring Sport looks more aggressive compared to the G, and unlike other special edition vehicles in Toyota's lineup, I think the modifications on the Touring Sport are tasteful. They give your eyes a bit more detail to absorb, which makes the vehicle more interesting to look at. I think it looks especially good in this red mica color. All variants of the Innova come with Toyota's 1GD FTV engine, which is the same diesel engine that powers the 4x4 Fortuner. It produces 174 horsepower and 360 Newton meters of torque. It produces less torque than the Fortuner, but it's still more than enough for the Innova. The engine is coupled to a 6-speed automatic. The Innova is based on the same ladder frame chassis as the Fortuner and the Hilux. It is more like a truck than a crossover. It is rear-wheel drive. It has a solid rear axle at the back and independent suspension at the front. The Touring Sport may be the better looking vehicle on the outside, but once you step inside, you will see why the G is the more expensive variant. The interior of the Touring Sport looks a bit more budget oriented. After all, the Touring Sport really is an Innova E with a couple of upgrades. The steering wheel of the Touring Sport is bare plastic, and I think that makes the biggest difference in the feel of the interior, because it's the part that you touch the most often. The steering wheel of the G is leather wrapped, and it also has wood accents. The wood panels on the dashboard on the G are also absent on the Touring Sport. Instead, you get these plastic panels which have diamond patterns on them. You also get manual climate control on the Touring Sport. On the G, you get dual zone climate control. Both the Touring Sport and the G have fabric seats, but the fabric on the G feels a bit more premium. On the Touring Sport, you don't get the tables at the back that you get on the G. The room is quite plentiful. You have one 12-volt outlet over here. You have blowers with 2 vents. You also don't get a center armrest. One difference between the E variant and the Touring Sport is that the Touring Sport gets a touchscreen infotainment display, while the E only gets a regular stereo. That's a pretty important difference because it improves not just the looks, but also the functionality of the vehicle. And if you were to buy an aftermarket head unit separately, you'd probably be spending around 30,000. The Touring Sport also gets backup sensors, which the E doesn't have. The G variant and the Touring Sport share exactly the same suspension, engine, and transmission. There's a bit of body roll during tight turns, but nothing too excessive. Ride quality with only 3 people on board was not the best, but it's acceptable. It rides more like a truck than a crossover. The steering is still hydraulic. It's a bit on the heavy side, but it's manageable. The 2.8-liter engine produces enough power. It doesn't feel underpowered. Overall, it's a pretty ordinary driving experience. There's nothing about it that I find particularly impressive. There's also nothing about it that particularly disappoints. The E variant sells for 1,309,000. The Touring Sport sells for 1,380,000. So it's a price difference of about 71,000 pesos. For that 71,000, you get a 2-din infotainment screen. If you were to buy that separately, you'd probably spend around 30,000 plus the installation fee. You also get rear parking sensors. That'll probably cost you around 2,000 to 5,000. And then you get the exterior modifications, which will probably cost you 20,000 or even more. Overall, I think the price difference can be justified. I'm sure you can save a bit of cash if you buy the E and then you source the parts from Banawe, but not everyone wants to do that. The Innova G sells for 1,506,000 pesos. The price difference between the G and the Touring Sport is about 129,000 pesos. For that price, you get a better interior, but not much else really. Also at 1.5 million, it is within the price range of mid-size diesel SUVs like the Montero and the Fortuner. While the G's interior looks nicer, I think it's hard to justify the pricing. At 1.5 million pesos, you have a lot of better options.